Register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. Today is Monday, June 8th, 2020. Thanks so much for joining us. It has been an eventful weekend, protest all around the country. The protests are not ending. The people are not going anywhere. And I get the impression that the people are telling the system, we're done with your shit. I feel like the people are giving the middle finger to the establishment. The ruling elite of this country have been put on notice. That's because for too long, this system has been designed to benefit a few at the expense of the many. And that's not tenable in the long run. And it's something that I really believe deep down inside is that no matter how long it takes, the people will not tolerate injustice long. The people will not endure injustices forever. It may take a generation. They may satisfy or pacify us with new toys and new gadgets, but the rancid underbelly of our system will always inevitably lead to the people crying for justice and fighting for justice. I covered this in an episode previously. It's this idea that justice and liberation are permanent ideas that you can't get rid of. And because you can't get rid of that idea, so long as there's one person, and in this case, there are thousands of people, but so long as there's one person who can conceive in their mind that there should be more equality, then the ruling elite will always be faced with a challenge from the people. And previously, I discussed it in this context. The ruling elite may rule for their lifetime and never go challenged because they've always found ways of pacifying the masses, television, entertainment, celebrity, gossip, sports. There's always ways that they find to pacify the masses, but it is an inevitability that somebody, or in this case, some tens of thousands of somebodies, have the idea of justice birth in their mind, and they go out to tell the system, we're not putting up with your shit anymore. And so it would behoove, and now what I'm getting ready to say right here is far-fetched, admittedly, but it should be said. It would behoove the rulers of our time, the ruling elite, it would behoove them to build an equitable society because the people will never stop fighting for it. You may delay it. They may stall it. They may make it out of this lifetime. They may live and die without ever having to give up anything to make the society more just. But their children are going to face our wrath. Their grandchildren will face our wrath. This system as a whole will inevitably face the wrath of the people who have been on the receiving end of the injustices of the ruling elite. It's only a matter of time. And I believe what we're fighting against, in addition to fighting against greed, we're fighting against people who have no desire to make society better for the next generation. They only are interested in what they can get out of it for themselves. And so for them, it doesn't mean anything to them to realize that they're creating a system that will inevitably implode on top of itself. They don't really have the foresight or the concern. They probably do have the foresight, but they have complete disregard for what they see as obviously coming. What has always been coming, what was always going to be inevitable, was the fact that the people would get the idea of justice and liberation in their head, and they will look at the inequities that are around us. They will look at the systemic oppression of black people at the hands of the police, and eventually the people we're going to always stand up and to rebel against this system. But when you have people who have zero regard for the future stability of our system, all they care about are the next quarterly profit margins, because all they care about is the wealth that they can garner in this lifetime. Those are the sociopaths that we have ruling us. That is the nature of the ruling elite. And what has always been inevitable was that this was going to come to a head at some point. And here we are 2 weeks 2 weeks into mass protest, 2 weeks of competing narratives, the ruling elite trying to first tell us that it was riots and that it was looting, trying to scare us off. They did everything that they could to scare us off of our protest, to see if we would blink. It was always a game to see who would blink first. First, they try to say to scare you with civility and say, oh, we don't want the rioting and we don't want the looting. And you know what the people said? We've seen that game before. You're not going to scare us or intimidate. Not when one, rioting and looting is fundamental to this country. It is a part of the founding of this nation. So you're not going to rob us of our right to do to you exactly what you did to the British. So we saw through that. Then they evolved and said, oh, it's outside agitators. Because they wanted us to divide. They wanted to separate the protesters. They wanted us to turn on ourselves because we'd be out there marching and looking for the outside. Who's the outside agitator? Let's get rid of them. But that narrative didn't work. Then they tried to call us Antifa. And what do? We all declare we're Antifa. So that narrative didn't neutralize us. Then the president of the United States all but tried martial law. And what do? We stared those police officers in their face. The people out on the streets did not abide by any curfew. And what happened? We showed, all of us, the people on the ground, those of you on social media echoing and repeating and sharing these videos, we showed the world exactly how vicious and malicious the police state has always been in this country. And that's when they lost the narrative. And what is the conversation now? The conversation now is the nature and the scope of defunding the police. Would you look at that? They did everything that they could to crush these protests. They did everything that they could to label us terrorists. They labeled us terrorists. And at every juncture, we flipped it on them. And now the conversation across the nation is the nature and the scope and the scale of defunding the police. What I'm trying to tell you is as long as we understand the games that they're playing and the manipulations that they're trying to put on us and the machinations, the political machinations that they go through to try to maintain power, to try to maintain control without ever having to change anything, because this system works perfectly fine for them. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It was designed to generate as much wealth and profit for the smallest group imaginable at the expense of the largest group possible. So long as this system was working fine for them, they would do anything to protect it, including unleashing the full force of the police state. And now we have police officers resigning all over the country. Good. Go home. Go dig a ditch. Now we have police unions are being exposed for the hate organizations that they are. Now we have police officers being revealed to be the malevolent and outright brutish beasts that they have always been in the black community. Now we see video after video that this is what they would do in the broad daylight with Karen and Susan and Joe Beth. Everybody knows underneath that what they have been doing in public to these white people, they have been doing 10 times as worse to black people when no one was looking. But the point is this, the biggest point of all is this. I don't care how long it takes. I don't care how many generations it takes. The ruling elite are eventually going to have to come to terms with the fact that the people will always rebel against an unjust government. The people will always rebel no matter what the price is. Do you see how many people are in the streets even though there's a strong possibility that they will get sick and die of COVID-19? The commitment that the people have to justice is complete. It is total. It is a total commitment. That is because we have all been seized upon. We have been apprehended by the idea of justice. And so long as that idea exists, which it always will, it doesn't matter how many generations it takes. It doesn't matter how much they pacify us. It doesn't matter how much they give us the opiate of the masses of any form, whether it be religion, whether it be entertainment. No matter what they give us, the people will inevitably look at an unjust system and say enough is enough. We are not taking this shit anymore. What's happening now across the country is the fact that we have now seized the narrative. The narrative is now defunding the police. And a lot of people are afraid of that idea and that concept, including the president of the United States. He thinks that he can win by proclaiming that it is the far radical left that has called for defunding the police and we need a country of law and order. I want you to always, whenever you hear someone say law and order, always translate it into control and system. The laws are there to control us to the benefit of this order, this system. The laws are not here. In many cases, when you say law and order, the law and order that they speak of is not here to protect the average person, but it is here to serve the system, the power structure, the order. So whenever I hear the president say law and order, I don't think peace and serenity. I think power and control. I think the systemic control of the masses to the benefit of the ruling elite. That's what it always has meant. That's how it is played out. This is why you see the police unions across this country having all of this power and being intimidating to all of the politicians. There's barely any politician across this country who would go head to head with police unions. And simultaneously, zero regard for any other type of union, trade unions, nursing unions, labor unions of any type. Every other labor union in this country is constantly under siege from the ruling elite. That's because police and police unions are here and have always been here to execute law and order on behalf of the ruling elite. In other words, police unions, they support the rulers, whereas every other type of union is a threat to them because it organizes actual labor. It organizes actual people, regular people who are trying to find solidarity and to find strength amongst their comrades. Whereas police unions, as my friend Alexander the Meh says on Twitter, they're not real unions because they're sent out to crack the heads of the real unions. And so we see that whenever someone says law and order, that we should never interpret that as peace and serenity. Law and order is not what gets you peace on your community, in your community, on your block. Law and order does not give you peace on your block. What gives you peace on your block are a couple of things. One is the social contract that you have in your community, the type of community that you want to have in your community. But two, what the mayor of Durham, North Carolina, Jillian Johnson said, the safest communities don't have the most cops. They have the most resources. Period. The communities that have resources are safe communities. The more a person has, generally speaking, unless you're dealing with a sociopath, which the ruling elite of this country are, the ruling elite of this world are, they're never satisfied with what they have. For most people, they would be satisfied if they could have a decent place to live, a decent income to feed and take care of their family, and to provide for a decent future. Most people are satisfied with a base level of living and don't have to engage in criminal activity to have the luxurious life. Yes, there are sociopaths among us, and they're generally on Wall Street and in Washington, D.C., in Silicon Valley. That's where sociopaths go who can never be satisfied with the wealth that they've gotten. But in most cases, most people would have a calm, peaceful community with minimum crime so long as they had access to resources. And wherever you see resources depleted, that's where you find crime. And instead of rectifying the situation by injecting resources directly into the community, what the ruling elite have done is to inject the police state. In other words, they're saying, we would rather give money to these people to brutalize you and to control you than to give you resources to have a thriving community. So I just want you to be able to connect all the pieces when you hear this. This entire idea of law and order has always been about systemic control. Order is the system, law is the control, but it is not for peace and serenity, because if you needed peace and serenity, you could go to a middle-class neighborhood where people are doing just good enough to pay their bills and to have a house and a picket fence with 2.5 kids and a little dog, and you have the peace and serenity that you think of when people say law and order. When you hear law and order, you should always think of the police state. All right. Now that that's out of the way, the president of the United States is screaming law and order in response to all of us who are screaming defund the police. And that is because we have seized control of the conversation, of the narrative. And I know a lot of people are a little skittish. They're a little concerned. They're like, well, I don't know. I don't know if we want to defund the police. How are we going to keep peace and control? I've already explained. You do not have peace in your community because you have police. You have peace in your community because your community has enough resources to have people who are not out committing crimes of desperation, crimes of survival, and crimes of opportunity. Because some people believe that their path out of poverty into some type of stability comes through whatever crime is available to them in their neighborhood. And there's far more. Listen, there's so many other people that you should listen to in terms of understanding the nature of crime and poverty. I'm just trying to give it to you in the simplest terms that you can access. And then for me, let me be the gateway drug. Go and find the deeper research of people who can actually give you the data on it. But I'm telling you what I know from experience and from observation, that the crime in your community is not controlled by police officers. Police officers are complicit with the crime. I never forget back when I thought I was going to be a preacher. And I keep telling you guys, I got to tell you about they have the wrong Ben Dixon. If you ever Google me, the information, and I'm trying to work this out with Google, but they're on vacation. The information there is about some pastor from the Midwest, some church or whatever. That's not me. There's another Ben Dixon who is white, who's a pastor. But anyway, that's besides the point. What makes it extra confusing was the fact that in a past life, I was a pastor. And when I was a pastor down in Pompano Beach, for a handful of years, for like 3 years, I used to walk the neighborhoods and try to talk to the people in the community, because that was the motto. Like, if you want to change your community, go into the community and talk to the drug dealers, right? And so as I walked through the neighborhoods, and I saw plenty of drug deals happening all around me, right? And everybody's so scared of drugs. Like, okay, fine. We can have the conversation about the legalization of drugs. But whenever you think of crime, the first thing you think of is drug deals. Well, there were plenty of drug deals going on every block that I walked. And the police were right there. Police were driving by slowly, not doing anything about it, not caring whatsoever. And that helped me. That was like my firsthand experience in the reality that the police are not here to control crime. The police are here to keep the crime inside of our borders. They're here to keep the police state alive inside the borders of the Black community. They're not really there to rectify the situation. In many cases, they have worked out deals. And the only reason I'm using drugs versus anything else is because that's what's so prevalent in people's minds. We need to legalize just about all drugs. But that's an entirely different conversation. What I'm trying to tell you is that the order and the peace that you seek never comes as a result of policing agencies. If you want order and you want peace, and strike, I don't even like the word order. If you want peace and serenity in your neighborhood, fund your neighborhood. Put resources in your neighborhood. Instead of putting billions of dollars into the police state to control your neighborhood, put billions of dollars into your community so that people can thrive. That is the motto. Crime is an economic phenomenon. The more economic resources a neighborhood has, the fewer crimes that it has. But what they have done is, this is precisely why the conversation about Mayor Bloomberg is so important. Because it is the thinking, it is the rationale that Mayor Bloomberg had in that audio that this show exposed, where he compounded the problem of crime in neighborhoods, in minority neighborhoods, by overflooding those neighborhoods with police officers. And what do we see? The more cops you put in a neighborhood, the more crime that exists in that neighborhood. There is a causal relationship between the number of police that you put in the neighborhood and the crime in that neighborhood, just like there's a causal connection between the economic conditions of a neighborhood and the crime in that neighborhood. So what do? You get rid of the cops and you put in funding so that everyone has a level of living that is satisfactory. Because for some people, we can be satisfied. We honestly can be happy with the picket fence and enough money to maybe go on a vacation once COVID-19 is gone. It's the thing is that the ruling elite, they're applying their morality to us. And we make the mistake of applying our morality to them. What do I mean? The ruling elite know that they are sadistic bastards. They understand that they are greedy sociopaths who can never be satisfied and that will kill you for $1. And so they have that expectation of everyone else. And that's why they have police and the police state to control us, because they fear that we will come and take their goods. We, on the other hand, normal human beings, we really are satisfied with just a base. If we could just stay out of the overdraft, have enough money for our kids to get a higher education, and have enough money to just have buy a widget or two, most people can actually be satisfied. And we make the mistake of applying that morality to the ruling elite instead of seeing the ruling elite for what they really are. The ruling elite see us as criminals because they are criminals. And so they unleash the police state on us to control us, when in reality, we need to control them. The ruling elite are the criminals. They are the sociopaths. And they are the ones who, if we come for them, when we come for them, it's not because we want their goods. It's because we are tired of being controlled by sociopaths who would see this entire planet burn just for their next quarterly profit margin. The Democratic Party, House of Representatives and Senate leaders and House leaders decided to put on a performance for us today. They kneeled in honor of George Floyd for about 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And they did so wearing the kente cloth, the traditional African garb that is worn by here in the United States by African Americans to connect to their ancestral roots. You had Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and a couple of other people who thought that would be something that we would be interested in seeing. Absolutely the hell not. No. What we're interested in seeing is actual policies that transform the policing agencies across this country or completely defunds them. That's what we want. We want actions. And so it would be different if, and I'm to be honest with you, I would love, like, if you came out there in a Black Panther outfit and you actually instituted some Black Panther Party for self-defense policies, then I'd be like, oh shit, let's do the damn thing. But you're doing this performative wokeness and this tokenism and coupling with milquetoast policies that are not designed to change anything, not in earnest. What do I mean? Listen, this is what they're supposing to unveil today in their quote unquote sweeping legislation. They seek to create National Police Misconduct Registry. Okay. They seek to ban chokeholds. Chokeholds were already banned in New York City back in 1993. That didn't stop them from using it to kill Eric Gardner just a few years ago. Limits qualified immunity. Get rid of qualified immunity. I'll go over what that is in a minute. Requires body cam, dash cam. We already have those. They cut them off when they want to. Limits transfer of military weapons to departments. Ban military weapons to departments. You see the problem here? Their reforms are barely reforms and makes lynching a federal hate crime. Nick, we are in the year of our Lord 2020, and we're still trying to get lynching to be a federal hate crime. This is what happens when you have elected officials who are more committed to symbolism, like wearing kente cloths, than they are actually changing the system. Now, I don't even know if I want to talk about electoral politics anymore right now. I don't care. Joe Biden is up considerably, so it looks like Joe Biden should win. But if anybody is capable of losing to Donald Trump, who has overseen the deaths of 108,000 Americans, depression levels of unemployment, as well as a full-on uprising, if anybody is capable of losing to Donald Trump underneath those circumstances, it would be the advisors and the consultants of the Democratic Party who think we're interested in seeing symbolism versus actual change, when hundreds of thousands of people have taken to the streets to tell the ruling elite that we have had enough.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.
Here we go. At this point in every single episode, I like to take a minute to thank the people who make this show possible, our patrons. Very special welcome to all of our newest patrons. Aaron Lee, thank you for becoming a patron. Tech New UC, thank you for becoming a patron. Sky Allred, Naomi Charlin, Clayton, Andy Wright, Olivia Rundell, and Dmitry Ulanov, thank you for becoming a patron. David Hershowitz, Bob Carsora, Joshua Gibson, Claudette Cohen, Raymond Meredith, Tobias Gillingskog, Amy John, Michael L., Matt, Scott Silver, Jordan Wayner, Patrick Stewart, Picard, Will Hine, Sparrow Hawk, Brian Hevlin, Gwen Plain, William, Dwayne Bernard, Raymond Frenchmore, Arlo Milich, and Hamish Goins. Thank you all for becoming patrons. You too can become a part of this prestigious and prodigious patron family by going to patreon.com/The BPD Show, where you get twice the content, uncut, unfiltered, and unedited interviews without any of the advertisements like you'll get right here.
Welcome back to The Benjamin Dixon Show. Visit us online at www.thebenjamindixonshow.com.
Yep. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. A lot of miles to go. As always, patrons, stay tuned after the closing music. We have another half hour of show. You can get access to that. Also, thank you to everyone who came to my live stream party. We ended up using Zoom anyway because I didn't have enough time to find an alternative. But it was great. So many patrons showed up and friends and family. And we just really had a good time, man. And I really appreciate the connection that we all have with one another and the love that we share. And it's just really dope. We are a family. We are a family. And I absolutely love being able to spend time with you all. And so we're probably going to do, we'll probably do a patron party like that now every 2 weeks or so, because the times, I would be, if we were not in quarantine, I certainly would be coming city to city to hang out with patrons. Okay. So since we can't do that, we're going to do it on Zoom or whatever platform I can replace Zoom with. All right. Well, one final thing for the public show before we move over to the patrons only episode. I want to stress the importance of political narratives and controlling the narrative. I've talked about that throughout this entire episode, but I have to reiterate something. The police budgets across this country are obscene in comparison to the budgets for anything else in the city. The police are the most funded entity in every single city. In New York, their budget is some $5 billion a year. LA, it's like $2 billion a year. The obscene amount of money that's being poured into the police state is something that people just accept as normal. But ask yourself this question, and not only ask yourself, but spread this question. Why should police have more funding than teachers? Why should we have more money for police to have riot gear than nurses to have PPE, especially during this pandemic? Why should we fund police officers with our tax dollars to abuse us and to suppress us when we have teachers who are using their dollars, their own money, to buy supplies for their students? We have schools in the same cities where they spend billions of dollars on the police state. We have schools that can't afford books. This is not hyperbole. This is the fundamental truth about how our society has been arranged. So when Donald Trump yells law and order, what he's talking about is spending billions of dollars every year on controlling your communities with the police state instead of pouring those dollars into developing the communities. And I'm not talking about economic development vis-a-vis neoliberalism. I'm talking about fundamentally transforming the material conditions of every single person in your city. We can do that with only a fraction of what is being spent on the policing forces across this country. And so when we say defund the police, we absolutely mean defund the police, because why should the police have more funding than school teachers? Why should the police have more funding than nurses, than healthcare systems? Why should we spend more money on the police in your city than we do on providing for the least of these in our city? Homelessness could be eradicated for a fraction of what police forces get. Instead, we hire police to go arrest homeless people so that they can meet their quota. I know a lot of people might be a little skittish about talking about defunding the police, but once you put it in the proper context, our society is fundamentally arranged wrong from top to bottom. From how we reward greed to how we use the police state to control people who don't have anything. This system is wrong. It is upside down, and it is destructive. And it shows you that the people who rule this world have no regard for the long-term survival even of our species. They don't care about that. All they care about is their next quarterly profit margin. And it is best reflected in the fact that we spend more money on beating our citizens with the brute force of the police state than we do educating them. We spend more money on putting our citizens in prison than we do educating them. So we are deadly serious about defunding the police, and that's just the beginning. That's just the beginning. The conversation has to change in our heads. We have to, somebody said on Twitter, and I agree, we have to get rid of the police state in our heads. We have to defund the police that are controlling our head. The very idea that you have in the back of your head that your community is safe because of police? No. Your community, if your community is safe, it's because you have enough resources to do something else than to do crimes of desperation. And you have enough resources to have a bright future than to use crimes of opportunity. That's why your community is safe. Your community, there are no barbarians outside of the gate of your community waiting to get in just as soon as the police stand down. No. The barbarians have always been the ruling elite who are sociopaths, whose greed can never be satisfied, who always need more, who would just as soon use a police officer to crack your skull than to see you get $5 more. Those are the barbarians that are outside of your gate, and they've been in your community the entire time. All right. Patrons, stay tuned in for 30 minutes more to get access. Patreon.com/the BPD show. For those of you who can't, thank you so much for being a beautiful audience. I will see you tomorrow. Take care, everybody.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/the BPD show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.